or at the level of a New England Patriots. So that's they're the model organization that is, of the last decade and a half. So, and I know the Saints are trying to emulate a lot of that. And hopefully this year it'll actually we'll see some results. But it's not there to me, and just my opinion. It speaks to a lack of discipline. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, what else can it be? So, that's just.
But why? Why is that?
Onto something there.
Why is that? Why is that? All these teams, year in and year out, can look at what Bill Belichick puts out on the field. Very disciplined, very few penalties. They know their positions. Very few guys are out of position. Is it because the coaches or the guys right under him are getting the message through to the players? And remember, he has had several different coordinators, several different assistant coaches. Why, right, Coach? And I mean, you've been on the sidelines. You've coached in high school and in college and everything. What is it? Why is that message getting conveyed a lot better than other professional teams in the NFL?
Well, it's first and foremost starts with knowing what's important and what isn't important. You could spend a lot of time and attention and detail to something that turns out to be relatively unimportant as opposed to the things that are important. Nobody does a better job in the league presently, or maybe ever, than the New England Patriots do in the area of player evaluation and attention to detail to the things that are really important. If something is important, it must be done specifically within very narrow parameters. If something is less important, then there's a wider latitude in the ability of being able to execute it. The Patriots make sure that every single thing that is important is done with excruciating detail and attention to that detail, and things that aren't important, they spend very little time. And they make sure in their player evaluation, first at player acquisition, they make sure they only acquire players with high levels of intelligence, that have a high level of ability to learn, and then from there, evaluate what the players can do, what they can't do, and they emphasize in all of their schemes what the players can do, and they de-emphasize what the players cannot do. But it starts with player evaluation and player acquisition, and especially in the area of intelligence, they make sure that they know as a coaching staff what is important, what isn't important. If you notice, they leave the ball on the ground very, very infrequently.
Right.
Now, maybe their footballs are softer. That might be why they were deflating the football, because that's easy to catch, but it's deflated. But that's something that is critical. And fellas, there's a million potential things that are important. It's not just one or two things. There's literally thousands of decisions that have to be made by a coaching staff as a whole every day, sometimes on the fly. And you've got to be able to eliminate or really minimize those things that don't have a big impact and emphasize things, and once again, with a very narrow range of correction of things that are really important. I mean, discipline is certainly a large part of it. That was one of my 4 principles at St. James: tradition, honor, discipline, and excellence. But discipline starts with knowing what's important, what isn't important, what players can do, what they can't do. And if something is important, knowing how to do it very specifically, how to do it exactly well, the way that it needs to be done, and making sure that your players do that. You can't do that for everything. Once again, there's thousands of potential things that you have to deal with. But in ball security, that's something that is an absolute. There's no question about that. In the area of penalties, making sure that your techniques are so well drilled and you're so specific in what you're drilling that technique that you don't get penalized very much. Even though the Patriots had 7 penalties accepted, Saints had 9 penalties out of their 15 accepted. The Patriots had 7 penalties that were accepted against them as well. So they're not perfect at it either, but they're the very best at player evaluation and knowing what is important and what is not important.
Wow. Player evaluation. And Professor, you and I had a conversation about that with the Saints. When I look at Andrus Peat, and I'm not saying the young man is not going to be a positive player for the Saints, but I still, at this point, question a number 1 pick on Andrus Peat. I really do. Go ahead.
Well, in fairness, how the Saints have this gentleman bouncing all over the place due to injuries or other things. That's not fair to Andrus Peat. And unfortunately, he has not been able to unseat Zach Street. I think Zach might be towards the last year or two, depending on how his play is, age and otherwise, the way Saints have transitioned their line. So he'll probably go to right tackle, next year or, depending on what happens with Zach Street. I don't know why he's not been able to unseat Zach Street, but I did not agree with the pick. But I know that was probably a Jeff Ireland decision, seeing that worked in Dallas. It's his second year. You're going to have to see, give him some, game time to play. He played a few games last year and did adequately, but I've always stated this. The number ones now in the NFL are not like, I hate to keep stating this, but from the days of Barry, Dad, and Nykow, they're just not. I did that study, you and I, over the last 5-6 years. Number 1 draft picks out the NFL now, you may get 1 gold star that come in at first and second year. It's taking these guys about 4 years to become any type of stars. There are not that many Luke Keatlings or J.J. Watts or Andrew Lucks or, coming into these drafts. It's like that. It's not like that anymore. I had to come to that realization because I found myself being very hard on first rounders because I'm looking for them to come back in the days of the George Rogers or the Wes Chandlers or the Chuck Muncie, Tony Galbraiths, the way it was back then in the 70s and 80s. The NFL is no longer like that. It is taking these gentlemen, because of what I alluded to in the earlier segment, because of and Barry brought up the keyword, because of a lack of discipline in these guys. These guys are not coming in and being, just superstars in year 1, year 2, year 3. Sometimes, many of your superstars in the NFL that make a whole, a real big splash coming in the form of either quarterback or wide receiver, and that's about it. For the most part, their first years are spent with trying to get accustomed to, work practices and bigger players and all of that. So you see a lot of the rookies, unfortunately, Sheldon Rankins example, Brandon Cooks, they get hurt, because the body has to adjust to a different level of playing football. Then their second year is, okay, well, I got somewhat of it down pat, so now I'm trying to craft and really get an understanding of my position. And I just think with bouncing Andrus Peat from guard, right tackle, left tackle, which the Saints are very, they like versatile players, I don't know if this young man has had a chance to just hone in that I'm the heir apparent to being a right tackle, or am I going to be a right guard? Because he clearly has not outplayed the current Saints guards that are ahead of him. So I think that in some fairness, I'm gonna give him just a little break because he's been juggled since he came into the league. And I know he came back in great shape and everything else, but for whatever reason, the Saints just have a hard time, even with the Sheldon Rankins injury. This team just can't, even with the safety that they drafted. I went blame speak.
Von Bell.
Bell.
Yep. The one that's in his fourth year, in his fourth year. Vaccaro. This team has bad luck. They just have bad luck with their number one and number two. Let's hope Mike Thomas and Von Bell can break this string. The Saints have had just I've never seen a team that just has had so much, the players they draft in the first and second rounds, they either get hurt, they don't pan out, It's just I've never seen a team. I don't know if it's that we evaluate wrong. I don't know what this is. I don't know if we evaluate wrong. Maybe the Saints are looking at players higher than what they think, or the scouts are not thorough enough. But man, I mean, you look back, we could have had Tyrann Mathieu. We passed on some players now. We made excuses. Lionel Collins. We made excuses for our own homegrown, 80 miles west, not to pick them. And now you have a lot of dud players you picked. And I look back, Tyrann Mathieu and Lionel Collins could be on the same team.
Yeah.
An all-pro safety and a guy that's probably going to be an all-pro, with the Dallas Cowboys. That doesn't register very well with me. That in the terms of our scouting. So I don't know. I'm going to give Andrew Speed. Same thing I said with Gary Grayson. They're just in their second year. So I'm trying to be fair to these fellas and their adjustments. But some things the Saints are doing in their scouting, I don't know. I don't get it.
Professor, let me interject something here. I agree with you 1,000% as far as La'el Collins is concerned. They should have had a full court press to have him on this football team. Sure. Tyrann Mathieu, if he was assigned with the Saints, would not be the player he is right now. In fact, there's a chance he could have gotten into really big trouble. He needed to get away from his homeboys. He needed to get away from New Orleans. He needed to get away from Louisiana. He needs to be in the desert in Arizona, where Bruce Arians understands the turmoil that young people have to go through, because Bruce Arians got expelled from high school because he got himself in trouble. So he understands that. And Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu couldn't have wound up in a better place than he is there. But you're exactly right about La'el Collins. And the point you're making about Andrew Speed, who in my mind was a Jim Finks pick.
Safe.
Just something Jim Finks would have done.
Yeah.
But I think your evaluation of Pete right now is spot on as well. That of all the people having to move from the right side to the left side, it's hard enough moving from guard to tackle, but staying on one side of the line and now trying to learn the other side as well. It's like trying to learn how to write with both hands. It's that difficult. Things look different. Everything looks different on one side and the other. Your stance is different. Your steps are different. Everything is different from one side to the other. So Professor, that evaluation is exactly right.
Let me ask you this, Coach. I mean, there's a lot to go into playing guard. There's a lot to go into playing a tackle position. You know that this is an important year to have this young man to see some sort of consistency. Why wouldn't you just keep him at one position and just leave him there? Because he missed a couple of key assignments early on in that game. Go ahead.
You are 1,000,000% correct, and they've been unfair to the young man who's only 22 years old. He's one of the younger players on the football team. And of all the people who move from one side to the other, from guard to tackle to guard, right to left, I mean, he's played 4 different positions in games, and to do that to the young man is unfair to him and his development. So they needed to, at the beginning of this camp, stick him at right guard and leave him there and let him learn that position.
Right.
And if anything, he could back up Streif at right tackle, but develop somebody else to play the left side. Really, you could have Lolito and Calamente over on the left side, and have Calamente, who did play a little bit of left tackle, as a stopgap type of situation. Learn how to play that side, because when you look at his assignment errors, especially one of them gets brought up. There was a zone block to the left side and he let the linebacker run through to his inside,
Yeah.
guess what? It's a different look.